So my title is I'm the Chief Analytics Officer for the City of New York. I work for a local government at the end of the day. Now, I'm of the view it's the best local government in the United States, but it's still a local government. So what that means is that we have a far more transactional relationship with the citizenry than, say, the state government or the federal government, right? We license businesses, we pave the roads, we regulate the utility that sends gas and electricity and water to your house, we pick up your trash, we deal with local transportation, we have the police power, we put out fires, we have ambulances, blah, 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 blah. So all that means is that, and we have about 300,000 personnel. About half those are teachers and police, but those personnel are allocated towards resolving those issues that I just described, doing the things, delivering the services to the citizenry that we have to deliver on a day-to-day basis. So what I was hired to do specifically was find a way to leverage the data that we have, that we collect on what we deliver as a service, and leverage that to get a higher return, however we want to define return. So, and I guess the subtitle here, the transparency is disruption thing, I know it's kind of cheesy, but really we sort of stumbled onto that. I didn't mean to do this. Wasn't intending to end up where we ended up, but here we are. And so kind of a brief background on who we are. I have a very small staff. It's about 5 statisticians total, and then 2 support, chief of staff and a deputy. I started off with just me and an analyst. They're all very young. They're fresh out of school. When we first got started, we had very old computers, and we used Microsoft Excel. That was my big data tool, right? And no one really understood what the hell I was up to. What that means is really like, I worked in a very small corner of a 300,000 person government, right? So it was completely under the radar, and that was a good thing. Now, we ended up to the point where I'm getting invited to come across the ocean and talk to you because we had the right data, meaning that the city does a pretty good job digitizing what it does. We have our licenses in a fairly decent database. We have our 911 and 311 calls in a fairly decent database, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are things that I could use to get quantitative about how we deliver our services. I had the right support, and by the right support, I mean I have the right mayor. Bloomberg's awesome. He is very, very supportive of an asymmetrical approach to government. And what does that end up being? It means that if I'm getting screamed at by some commissioner who's really upset that I'm rooting around their backyard, the mayor backs me up. And that's great, right? Now, I can't run to him every 10 minutes, so I have to deliver. If I run to him more than once every 6 months, he'll probably start screaming at me. So, we have to deliver on what he gives us, but at a minimum, the mayor and the deputy mayor for operations and my immediate report, who is the chief policy advisor, they're all just very supportive of a very asymmetrical approach to government. This is a very different way to deliver government services at the local level than anybody else in the country is doing, with the exception of one of my best friends out in Chicago, who's my counterpart, and they're just getting off the ground. So, and then when I say we have the right clients, the agencies are my clients, right? I don't tell them what to do. What we do instead is we provide insight that we believe is actionable, tailor it to their ability to act on it, and then, whatever they want us to change, we'll change. It's a very iterative process. I treat them like clients. It's not top down. It's been very organic. And then finally, we focus on action. What I mean is, it's very directional. We're just trying to figure out where to park our resources to get the biggest return, right? That means that I can immediately send inspectors out based on the insight we have, and then get validation on whether or not the algorithm makes sense, and then tweak it immediately, right? It's not some long-term project. The first step we had to do was prove that it made sense to do this, right? And so what does this represent? An illegal conversion is a place where a landlord jams a bunch of people into a space that, more than it should be there, and it's very unsafe. They do it for money. And we get about 20,000 complaints about that a year in a city of 8.5 million, with about 1 million buildings. It becomes exceedingly difficult to figure out where to send our 200 inspectors, right? So, it used to be based on a simple cue. If you called before we would go to your house first, even though you may live on Park Avenue and you live in the Bronx, right? And the Bronx is, a poor area of the city of New York. So we actually should go there first. We just had to figure out a way to do a tell that would let us know that we should be going there first. And the crosstab became fire. So we basically broke down illegal conversions right? About everything we knew as a city about them, whether or not they had a tax lien on them, meaning did they pay the taxes, what the zoning was, how old the building was, what was it made of, blah, 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 blah. And it was very granular data, and then we just cross-tabbed that with fire, right? And then certain correlates just popped. So they said to us, it turns out if you have a tax lien on your property, you are 9 times more likely in the city of New York over the last 6 years to have had a fire. So go there first, right? So now I'm going to go there instead of there, right? And that's the efficiency gain. You have the targeted, right, meaning the things that we have identified now as places we should prioritize. It also turns out that fire risk is a good correlate for code violations, right? So, they kind of feed off each other. So building code violations, we're far more likely to be found where we send our inspectors. That's good ROI on our inspection man hour. That's good return on the tax dollar. We're going where the problems are. We're going to the worst first. Now, that targeted silo has about 600 properties in it, right? Over the last, well, no, now it's more of 1,000. But, it's not that many, right? And the other side has about 25,000 a year, 25,000 a year. So it's still just a proof of concept. It's Petri dish level stuff. But I admit now, for the first time publicly, that I used it to build this. So what does that mean? So we use spreadsheets. I used open data, right? I think there's been some conversation about open data. We post a bunch of data to our website, and I just pulled that, and that was our initial filter tool. It's not great. Some of it's really old, or previously wasn't. So I needed to come up with a way to tap into the back end of the systems. Agencies giving me data means the possibility exists that they're going to report. I know people think about the government as some monolithic entity, and in fact, I guess prospectively it can be. But inside, we are a fractious group of cats that never get along, right? So I needed to come up with a way to tap into the back end, all those little green things are city agencies, right? And the little yellow boxes are the data sets. So the fact that my kids were so successful in targeting our city inspectors gave me cover to build this, right? So now I have an ability to know what we know as a city, at least in terms of operational capacity, right? So that, and then once we're there, there we go. Okay, then I had to use that aggregation of information more broadly. So these are rock curves. Now, if I can understand these, anybody can, because I am not a statistician, but a rock curve essentially is what it tells us on the x-axis is how many structures, in this case, it's how many structures do we have in the city of New York. So imagine like 1 million structures, right? And then on the y-axis, it's 2,200 fires a year. So if you just randomly selected from that x-axis value, if I went to the first 10% of the buildings in New York City, I would capture just by randomness, 10% of the fires, right? So the first on the left, right? On the left-hand side is the rock curve for what the city's performance was for fire inspections by the fire department. They do their own inspections, about 50,000 of them a year, right? So they were getting out, actually, they were having a negative return on how they were sending out inspectors until you got to about 60, 65% of the buildings in New York City. They never get to 60 to 65% of the buildings in the city. If we're lucky, we get out to the first quarter, right? So what we did was we just changed the weights using this newly available information in this newly routinized dynamic manner so that our return in the first quarter is significantly higher. We're getting to the places that are the worst early. So that's our ROI, right? And then look what happens, right? So these are 3 maps of New York City, not very well aligned. But the first map at the bottom right there, that shows where they go, or where they had been going up until we came along. There, up on the left, upper left, is where our algorithms told us we should be going, and that's where the fires have been, on the right. So we're getting far better. We're sending those inspectors out where they need to go. Now, inspections aren't as sexy as cancer, I know that, So, but the reality is that's where the benefits are going to come. Government is not sexy. Government is really boring on a lot of levels. So, it's all about, like, I got this much money, I got to send this many people out and deliver this much widget. How do I do that effectively? Well, you do it, getting better, getting better than you currently are. So that's what we're doing. So what can I say now? Now, this is sort of a little overblown, but the reality is true. When you say evidence-based policymaking, what I mean by that is that, like, we take a quantitative approach as much as possible to the information we have. to the resource allocation we're doing. So now I went from that original group with just me and this one kid who was really good at baseball analysis, right? And we did like, a half dozen to a dozen inspections a week. Now about 200,000 inspections a year being risk assessed or being risk driven versus the randomness I described. And another 100,000 are coming online. That's all kinds of inspections: restaurant inspections, housing inspections, water inspections, blah, 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 right? We got to have $5 billion in money from the federal government for Sandy recovery. Now previously there's certain, or ultimately will be $5 billion, right? But previously there's just the way the reporting system went. We would get the money, we'd say, okay, well, we'll fix the roads over here. And then we'll fix the houses. And then we'll provide some money for businesses. And then we'll get around to the schools, right? And so it's really stupid and inefficient. So what we're going to do now is use that same web of information that I described that'll tell us, okay, where do we want to go first? Well, we should be spending as a city money on the people that were most disadvantaged, who lost their houses, because it's far more impactful on them. Again, I don't want to spend federal money on fixing up somebody who's got a ton of money, right? Who's able to stay in a hotel and can handle that and can handle, the thought of being jobless a lot more sustainably, say, than somebody who's, barely hanging on. So we got to target them first, and that's what we use the data for. First response system improvements. That just means like we're trying to figure out you can improve 911 response by either without hiring more people, by either sending the ambulances and the police cars and the fire trucks through every red light, right, which carries its own risks, or you tweak the back end of the process. The back end of the process is the script, right, with a 911 call taker. It's like 911 emergency response. What's your emergency, right? Because we are now able to really get granular on every single call, and that's 40,000 of them a day, right? We can identify outliers, both good and bad, eliminate the bad through training, and routinize the good, right? Maybe change the script. Maybe put what borough you're in as a question further down the list than say what your emergency is, because that'll tell me right away do we need to fire up the ambulance or not, right? Expedited business licensing, same concept. Just all these things, because we're able to get quantitative about what we do, we're able to tweak more effectively, right? So what's next? I mean, I'm not going to get into all these, but these are just ideas these are uncomfortable things that are now being raised because we're able to actually kind of get past the what should we do to, okay, we're doing it, now what, right? So the sharing economy, Airbnb was just declared illegal in New York City, right, by an ECB judge, a administrative law judge. That's kind of a problem, right? So we have, Airbnb is a big company, and a lot of people like it. And now whoever signs up potentially faces a $2,500 fine. So we got to figure out a way around that. And I think that actually the fact that we can get quantitative about what we do will help us deal with the sharing economy as it impacts us. 911, 301 is just, how do we interact with the citizenry more robustly, right? Now, people have talked about privacy. I'm an attorney. I don't have a Facebook or a Twitter account because I don't know why. I just don't get it. But, the kids who work for me all do, right? So, and the fact is, there's a lot of fruitful things. And I mean, I think the gentleman from Nairobi who preceded us, right? He had a thing up where, Puget Sound is just tracking tweets on trash. We do that too, right? So that's useful stuff. But the question then becomes, at what point does it get creepy? And I think it gets creepy really fast. So we have to figure out a way. My way around that in some senses is just to be hyper-transparent, right? So, take the same nucleus of data that I just described in that giant octopus and push that out to the public, because at the end of the day, it's their data, with obviously some exceptions. We have our own healthcare law, privacy obligations, tax law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So respectful of those, robustly respectful of those, because the fines are off the charts and we'll go bankrupt in a week if we violate them. We should just get hyper-transparent, And then finally, unions. This kind of approach, as I said, is asymmetrical. Asymmetry and collective bargaining agreements don't necessarily go together well. So we're trying to figure out with our union. I get sued a lot. I mean, essentially, it's like you guys are violating the rules. This is not what we signed up for. Why should I, at the Department of Buildings, be held accountable for an outcome that's measured by the fire department? Sorry. Like, this is the way it's got to be, and it actually doesn't violate the collective bargaining agreement. So if you're talking about accountability, at the end of the day, what the transparency has done is impose this whole new regime of accountability outside of an auditor or a controller or an inspector general, so that now the fire department is holding the Department of Buildings accountable because they can now quantify what they always suspected, which is when they don't do their job, those guys get hurt, right? So that's it. Thank you.